Hey friends, I'm Maxwell Freud, a queer Minneapolis-based game designer and the host of Hatch This Way, a limited audio series where I chat with other queer folks in the tabletop industry to learn all about who they are and how they contribute to the hobby by being their authentic selves. Today I'm joined by Carrie Linden. Carrie, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Excellent. So the first question we always ask here is, how do you identify?
I'll just throw it all at you.
Yes.
I identify as she, they. I don't want to say I'm old. I identify as bi, but I realize that in current terminology, I'm pan, and I also identify as disabled.
I want to talk about all those things.
Okay.
So let's start with the pronoun journey. What was that like? How did you arrive there? Just talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I think I don't want to say I'm an odd duck, but I grew up in Northern California. I grew up in Sonoma County. My family is predominantly from the Bay Area, San Francisco. So I feel like I'm kind of lucky in the queer space that I grew up in a family where I had a gay uncle, having a family that was rooted in San Francisco. It was like I was always aware of queerness. It was always sort of there. And I grew up in a family where it was not always totally understood because it was the late 70s, early 80s. But it was there and family was loved and family was supported. So I kind of always knew that I was different. I knew that I didn't fit kind of the confines of what I was supposed to be like. So, even as a kid, when people would refer to me as a girl or lump me into things that were girl like, I would have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to it and be like, but that's not me. But I also had the same reaction when people would accuse me of being too masculine and being like, oh, you're just like a little boy. And I'd be like, well, I'm not a little boy. But I also knew that I wasn't a little girl, but I didn't know the words for it because, I'm born at the tail end of the 70s. So the words that we had for somebody that didn't gender conform were awful. It was awful. It was awful, and it was heavily stigmatized, and I didn't identify as that. Like, I didn't want to be something completely different. I just didn't feel like I fit in the total mold, and I didn't like the dialogue that was sort of being had around kind of the current public understanding of gender nonconformity. So I just was she, her for a very long time because it just, like, it was the body I was born in. I never had any dysphoria around my body. So it wasn't a big pushback for me to put on other pronouns. And honestly, I didn't know that you could unless you were completely changing into like the other side of the binary. It wasn't until I was much older that I started hearing terms like, non-binary, NB, and kind of running into people who used different variations of pronouns, used all of them. And for me, then it really sort of sat like, by then I was an adult, I'd had a child, I'd done all the female things, or the quote unquote female things that your body physically is, designed to do. Not that they all do it, because they don't. So I kept the she because there's a lot of hardships that femme-identifying people go through and that cis women go through, and I didn't want to skirt it because by then I'd experienced a lot of that, and I was very defensive of femaleness and what happens in a misogynistic world. So I didn't want to get rid of that because there was a loyalty there, even though I think at my core, if I were to grow up now, I would just be they, them. That is what I am. That is how I would relate. But at this point in my life, I will keep the she. It'll stay there indefinitely, just for complicated loyalty reasons. I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
I think it makes sense of like wanting to, based on like how you're presenting it, it sounds like you want to kind of establish yourself as like having some credibility in that conversation of like, yeah, I do understand where you're coming from. I also understand like both things are true. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. And I think it's also because of like my experience growing up. Like I didn't know there was another way to identify for a long time. So I identified as female. And so that was a really vital part of my upbringing. It would feel very weird to kind of completely get rid of it, even though I have a knee jerk reaction to it. It still is, yeah, it's still me. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think about it often because I've got a kid that is an adult now, and I look at his generation, and it is interesting that I would be different were I growing up, in the time period that he is. Yeah, I don't think even I have it completely sorted out why I still keep that one there, but I do.
I think that's totally fine and valid. I don't think it has to be such a clean little neat box for everyone. I think it's comfortable and nice and great if you do fit
Yeah.
into a neat box. It can be messy and complicated, and that's what makes you you, like you don't have to be anything.
Yeah.
For anyone listening who is figuring out their identity, that's how you identify, and that's you. Like no one gets to tell you that's wrong.
Right.
That's what I have to say about that.
Thank you.
So then talk to me about it. I feel like the way you presented it was very similar of like the bi pan thing.
Yeah. The bi pan thing, that I know why I still refer to myself as bisexual. Growing up, there was gay. And then a lot of different derogatory terms associated with that. And that was the first term that I heard and the first term that I knew because I had my uncle and his partner. And so gay men were what I knew. And I didn't really think about it. That was just family. That was normal. It wasn't until I was a little bit older when, you start hearing, more terminology for women. And then it was like, okay, I was introduced to the term lesbian. And again, all the derogatory terms that went along with that at the time. But I found it really interesting that there was, at that time, there'd be a lot of pushback too against women using the term gay. It was like, well, no, gay is just for gay men. And if you're a homosexual woman, well, then you're either homosexual or you're a lesbian. There was this sort of hard divide between the two of them. And I really didn't hear much about bisexuality at all. That wasn't my early experience that people were. It was like you were one or the other. You were straight or you were gay. And there wasn't kind of that, nobody talked about sort of that spectrum of sexuality, at least not where I kind of was. So it wasn't until I was, I want to say in high school, when I started hearing the term bisexual. And I never saw attraction attached to gender. So for me, it was never attraction was never a gender based thing. It was like, oh, this person's attractive. I'm attracted to them. And even from a really early age, my crushes weren't gender specific. They were all over the place. And I've always had a really strong appreciation for androgyny as well. So for me, my understanding of bisexuality was it goes from two ends of the spectrum. It goes from that super masculine identity to the super feminine identity and everywhere in between. So for me, it always encompassed people like me, people that didn't fit a gender norm. So I grew up with it just being kind of that. It's like I am attracted to both sides and everything between. So I never had a problem with the term bisexual. It wrapped up me in a nutshell from my understanding of it at that time. It wasn't until I was much older where I was introduced to the term pansexual. And it fits, but it also, to me, meant the exact same thing as my definition of bisexuality. And then I started kind of realizing that more and more people, either the definition of the term had changed or I had just applied my own definition of the term because I was young and I had found the term and it fit, or I felt like it fit me. And then now, obviously, bisexual can be a really hot button term with a lot of people having dropped it because there's a connotation sometimes that it excludes the trans non-binary community. For me, it doesn't. For me, bisexual includes all of those lovely people in it as well. But I know that for some people, it doesn't. So yeah. So I still, just because it's the term that I have carried with me for so long, and because when I found it, it was my aha moment. It was like, oh, this is me. This explains why I am not like, a lot of the other people I know. Growing up, growing up queer isn't easy. Growing up queer and not fitting a gender binary, and then also not fitting neatly inside a sexuality like binary, just makes it this whole can of worms. So when you do find a term that sort of encompasses you, it becomes kind of home. So it's really hard for me to let go of the term. So I still use it.
Yeah. No, I think if you met someone and you introduced yourself and somehow it came up that you identified as bi, I mean, if you're just leaving it there, I don't know. I feel like these really only come up in situations kind of like this where you're going to, I would think, usually have some kind of discourse around it, hopefully. I guess,
It's
I mean,
but you don't always, because I
yeah,
live
sometimes you just throw it out there, don't you?
I live my life on the internet. Part of
Yeah.
my job being that I run, the social media for the company, and I'm very active in online spaces just on my own. If it's bi awareness day or something like that, and you make a post, or like I've got bi-colored dice, and I'll post a picture of the new dice that I picked up from, a fellow dice maker, and somebody will put on a comment section, "Oh, I didn't know that you were transphobic." And it's like, what? Like, it's just my dice. Like, can we talk? Like can we have a
Oh.
conversation about this instead of just jumping to this conclusion because of the three colors that are here? Like, yeah, it's interesting. I think you used to have more conversation about it, and now I think people just become so much more prone to having sort of a knee-jerk reaction to things that sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just, this is what this means then, and I'm going to apply this tag to you even though it might not apply. And sometimes it's an age thing. Like I'm older. I'm in
Mhm.
my mid 40s. So it's like I get that terms change and they start to have other meanings, and I'm trying to wean myself off of the terminology that was comfortable for me so that it makes me more comfortable for a younger generation where that meaning has changed. But it's hard because that word still has a lot of meaning to me personally, but people don't necessarily take the time to find out why, or to understand how my definition might be different than theirs.
This seems like an interesting topic. I don't think I've talked to a lot of people about is like in based on my comment of just literally not thinking of online spaces, which are a huge part of how
Yeah.
we all of our lives now. I mean, I hate social media. I every app is a hellscape in my opinion, and I have to engage because if I don't engage, then nothing I do is relevant, and like you're not getting content that is actually serving you in any way. Like you have to kind of curate your people and the audience and the information that you're taking in and the information you're putting out. Like it's draining. In short, I think social media is incredibly draining for a lot of different reasons. It's interesting. I wouldn't think that somebody identifying as like bi, on the internet where that totally makes sense where you have like, here's a single slice of information about me, and then getting these just jumping to
But that's
conclusions and just, yeah, hot takes.
unfortunately that's social media. So like you're right. Like if I am in a group with people and the conversation comes up and I say, "Oh yeah, I'm bi," oftentimes you'll get, "Oh, well, what does that mean to you? Or why do you identify
Mm.
that way?" And then you'll have the conversation, people get it. Like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, online is different. I've existed in the gaming space online for a long time now, predominantly kind of in the video game space and then in the esports EDU space, and then have sort of transitioned over more into the board game space during my time with Snowbright Studio. So I've had a lot of time online. I used to stream, so I used to be live, 3 to 4 times a week, and very active in a lot of the online spaces and existing in that sort of parasocial relationship sphere. And it is very common for there to be sort of that, as you said, hot takes, or that sort of knee jerk reaction. And one of the things that I kind of always worked on, both just from my accounts into, I used to be an educator, or I guess I am an educator. I used to teach. And what I was teaching gamers specifically is having, those conversations about how you are in line, and realizing that, when you are reading somebody's content, you're reading, especially in the height of Twitter, you're reading a tiny snippet. You're not, and oftentimes not even a full sentence worth of a thought. Like you're seeing a kernel of someone's psyche or process. And there's no way you're going to be able to have a meaningful conversation in this space because it is so limiting in what you can convey in the number of characters that you have. It's just not going to bring about clarity and understanding. That's not what social media is built for, especially not that era of social media. So, trying to understand and have conversations around, just because somebody has said something and you have taken it a certain way, not even getting into the fact that reading text is so easy to misinterpret just in and of itself, if that kind of that recommendation of, if you see something, ask a question, slide into somebody's DMs and be like, hey, I'm just kind of like, I saw you post this. I've just, out of curiosity, if you don't mind sharing, there are better ways to go about things than having that knee-jerk reaction, or in some cases immediately canceling people. But unfortunately, that's where we've kind of come to with social media. We might be backtracking out of it on some of the platforms, like Blue Sky and Threads are currently a little more understanding and supportive. There's been a lot of pushback against kind of that behavior that really just sort of ran rampant on Twitter pre-X, and now I haven't been on since it's really switched, so I'm sure it's so much better now. It's a quagmire.
I'll tell you, it's not.
No,
if I didn't have to be on it, I absolutely would not. But when you are a creator of anything and you want to be involved in the world now, you have to have like some presence on social media. You just have to. Like, that's how people share information.
Yep.
And it's very hard to get information otherwise. So
yeah,
it's like a necessary evil. It doesn't mean we have to be content with how terrible it is, but no. I'm also like not perfect. I'm definitely guilty of having to learn that, like, okay, this is not a full, like, I can't just like go in and assume stuff. I have to like you said, like asking a question, like don't go in with an opinion, go in with the question and make sure, because you can't know. It's so hard.
No, and sometimes you're catching somebody on a bad day. Sometimes you're completely reading into everything and you've added the punctuation and the intent behind it. Yeah, there's a lot that can go wrong on social media. I always advocate for delicacy.
Yeah, I think that's like a broad, like just a general issue. I think it's compounded because all the spaces I'm in are going to be queer or neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And I try to, be very aware of neurodivergent, disabled people. Like, I want to have their voices in my feed. I want to have those people in my feed. So I have to be very aware of when people are posting things. Like, I try to learn and listen as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, it's challenging too, because in all of those spaces, terminology is always changing and adapting, and we have to give people time to change and adapt with it, especially as people get older, or even just people who aren't on social media 24/7. Like, there's times where you're going to miss things just because you're going to miss them. It's not going to come up in your feed, or you're going to see it and you're going to forget it, especially if you're neurodivergent. Like, sometimes you might have to see that thing multiple times before your brain goes, oh yeah, the thing, like this changed. And so it's not that you're intending to use a term that is now not being used. It's just that your brain's got it hardwired and you're still in the process of reprogramming it to the new terminology. So I think allowing people some grace, especially if you know the people and you see their content and you see that their content is intentionally like thoughtful, and then something feels a little off, the intention for it to be off probably isn't there. It's probably like them just, transitioning or not having heard about something, or, made adjustments, because it does change. It is all being rewritten as we learn more things or as we become more comfortable with ourselves. And yeah.
So we might come back to this, but I do not want to gloss over the last way you identified, which is disabled. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I am the poster child for invisible disability. I have I deal with chronic pain. So I am a chronic migraine sufferer. So if I am not being medically treated, I will have migraines for 20 to 24 days a month, like for 24 hours a day. So the majority of my month will just be active migraine. And that started when I was really young, but it started with pediatric migraine, which nobody could really identify. So I got sick a lot on car rides. Like I was kind of the family joke that you could put me in a straight line in a car and I would be vomiting by the time 10 minutes had passed. Like people are like, we didn't even turn. I'm like, I know, I don't know why. And I saw spots, but not always, but sometimes I'd see these black circles, and doctors didn't know why. And I got older, I got photosensitivity on top of kind of what I already had, but I didn't have headaches, but I didn't know that what I had was pediatric migraine. And I wasn't identified until after I had my son, and I had like my first full blown migraine attack. And it was like your stereotypical, like, this is a migraine. And it laid me out for like 6 hours. And I went to my doctor and I was like, I've got, a 2-year-old child. I can't be incapacitated. Like, and I was a single mother. I'm like, I can't be incapacitated for this. So I finally got my diagnosis on that and started getting treatment. So that's been kind of one of the things that has just been with me my entire life. And then I also have an autoimmune disorder that is in the process of being identified. I don't know that it'll ever be fully identified. I'm currently under the umbrella of chronic fatigue. It's a weird one. So it shows up as if I've had lymphoma, but I haven't. So it's a weird one, and it hasn't really gotten pegged down, but it responds to physical exertion or emotional exertion. So if I get too excited about something or something stresses me out, or like this weekend, we moved 3 rooms in our house. And so I've been struggling all week with my health because my body just starts attacking itself. And that started also when I was a small child. It used to be the running joke that if Christmas was coming, I'd be sick because I'd get excited about it. Or if I spent the night at a friend's house, they're like, oh, get ready for her to get diagnosed with strep throat because she's going to get super ill. And it was another one of those things where the doctors were like, oh, it's all psychosomatic. And it wasn't until I was a lot older and I went through specialists and like, oh, yeah, no, you definitely have an autoimmune disorder. We just don't really know what it is because we haven't really studied all of these, terribly efficiently. So yeah, chronic illness and chronic pain has been my wheelhouse my whole life. I've gotten really good at masking, and I still struggle to be, I don't want to say okay, because I accept who I am. That happened in my 20s. It was like, no, this is just who I am, and that's fine. But as a professional, it's really hard to be, I don't want to say less than perfect. It's hard to be flawed. I worked in education where you're allotted a very small number of sick days, and after that, it comes out of your paycheck. You're paying for your subs. And when you are sick, there's a lot of not kind or supportive words that'll come down from administration about the impact your absence has on your class and your students' learning. So it was very challenging for me to be who I am, knowing that it was not accepted, supported. Like it was a big hindrance in the workspace. So it's been interesting. I've worked with Snowbright now for many years. And it's been interesting watching myself come to terms with the fact that I work in a supportive environment with people who are disabled or identify as disabled, identify as neurodivergent, and who support their fellow staff members in their own identities. So yeah, I've been on a journey. I've been on a journey of acceptance and realizing like when I should take a day and know that it's okay, because my coworkers will also take days when they need to. Because I normally would have just been like, we're masking up and we're going in and no one's going to know that we feel like we're dying and it'll be fine because I'm not really sick. I'm just me sick. And, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I've noticed, obviously they're different things, but I've noticed a lot of parallels between like neurodivergency and queer experiences and then, disabled experiences to an extent of that whole journey of having to discover who you are and like navigate a world where the expectations are something very different.
Yeah.
They're all very, they're unique experiences. I'm not saying they're the same, but there are parallels, I think.
There are definitely parallels. It's how you affect other people just by being you. I remember for me, my 40th birthday, I felt awful. Like I felt horrible, but it was just my autoimmune disorder kicking up. So I was fine. I was just, my body was attacking itself. And I remember just kind of being like, because you get used to like you cancel on your friends a lot and, trying to find people that understand that like, yeah, you might talk to me yesterday and I might have been fine, but today I'm not fine. And no, I'm not going to be making the engagement that we talked about. And I remember my partner just loading me in the car and being like, oh, we're going to go get sushi. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, we're going to go get sushi. I'm like, okay. And I walk in and my parents are there and like my best friends are there. And it was just like, for me, it was this moment of like, it had taken 40 years to find, I'm going to tear up. Sorry. It took me 40 years to find my family, like the people who were like, because my partner called them and was all, well, yeah, she feels awful. And they're like, yeah, but that's just Carrie. Like, is she sick or is she Carrie sick? And he was like, Carrie sick. And they're like, okay, we're coming because we know she'll want to see us anyways. And we won't make her, so we had this really nice dinner and everybody came over to the house afterwards. And I was able to like bundle up on the couch and open my presents and hang out with my family. And it was really cool. And it just felt awesome because there was no shame. There was no guilt. There was no, oh, we came and you're not super bubbly. It was just, we're going to come, we're going to feed you your favorite food and we're going to go back to your place where you're comfortable. And we're just going to hang out with you. And then we're going to leave, so that you can go to bed. And it was just really awesome. But it's taken me 40 years to find those people because I didn't work in work environments where me being me was accepted. And I've had partners that would get angry when I couldn't do things. And now like I've got a partner that will laugh. And we'll just be like, sit down. Like, sit down. You've done too much. This is going to make you sick. You know what your body's going to do to you if you do any more. Just sit down. And having people around me that have my back, because I'm a notorious overworker and I've spent so many years like masking my condition that, I'll play through the pain so that nobody knows and I don't put anybody out. And it's really nice now to like have people around me that I don't have to do that for and to work for a company that I don't have to do that for. And so I can just be me. Yeah. I didn't think it'd be this emotional.
No, that's totally okay. I absolutely get it. I think super universal experience, in everyone's own way. I think for me, it definitely, I feel like I really had to find definitely my like chosen family around me to build up that support before I could actually then starting to identify seeing healthy things in partners and then actually being able to find a partner that is supportive and understands, my brain and who I am and like is an actual good partner.
Right.
It took me having to first surround myself with people to help me see and be comfortable and actually learn who I am before I could actually find someone I was healthy with.
It's interesting how normalized toxicity is in our culture, in every aspect, in families, in workplaces, in our personal relationships, and how we don't even necessarily notice it until we find the alternative. I find that too, just in certain spaces, like, when you find yourself just in a predominantly queer space and all of a sudden you realize that you're just comfortable. Or, the same thing with the disabled neurodivergent space. There can oftentimes there's can be a lot of overlap, but like when you're in that group and you've got like, these 3 people are disabled, those 2 are neurodivergent, everybody's queer, and all of a sudden you're just realizing that nobody's masking and everybody's just them and it's comfortable, and you're like, oh, I don't want to not have this. Like, I want this in all of my spaces because it's just such a breath of fresh air for everybody to just be able to be them and not have there be judgment and just have there be acceptance and understanding. And that's not to say that those spaces in general don't have toxicity, because they all do. But when you can find that group that isn't, it's really nice. And yeah, like you said, it makes you more aware of what those characteristics are, that I think you can then start to look for that in other relationships.
Yeah. Find what you need to make you the better version of yourself.
Yeah.
But you have to know like where you are actually at.
I always refer to it as the difference between going after what you need versus what you want. And yeah, that's not always easy. Sometimes you got to go through a lot of mud before you're like, yeah, no, we're good. I'm going to go for the things that I need.
I've heard people also phrasing it as you're going after what you think you deserve, not actually what you do deserve.
Right. No, and it's interesting because on all of those aspects, on being queer or neurodivergent or disabled, there is a lot of impact that other people's perception of us has on like ourselves. Like, I know I've been in a lot of relationships with a lot of men that thought I was really dandy when they first met me. And then over time, my queerness became an issue, even though I don't know that they knew that it was an issue. Like, it wasn't until later when I realized, oh yeah, like there were things about me, like I wasn't femme enough, and it became an issue. Or yeah.
I think I've realized as I gotten older that I spent so much of my life making myself so small for people. Like, that's really my MO, was how can I be quieter and smaller? And I think it started when I started getting like picked on or called out for being gay, which femme basically. And so it traumatized me, and like my immediate family and like my environment made it worse. Like, I did not hear support from my family.
Yeah.
And so I spent such a long time building myself a closet basically. And then I feel like I will spend the rest of my life trying to break down that closet. But
yeah, it's interesting. I think we're always unpacking baggage of past experiences. I don't know that it's ever done. I would like it to be at some point. It would be nice to have it be done. But I'm always aware of it too, where you're like, oh yeah, this is, I'll try and hide something about myself, or that inner dialogue will be like, oh, it's because I'm difficult. And it's like, I'm not difficult. I just might not be that person's cup of tea. And that's fine. Like, and they don't get to throw that on me. They can move along and find somebody else that is more to what they're looking for. But it isn't always easy. It isn't always easy, especially when you've been receiving those messages for such a long time. I know for me, I think the one that obviously the disability has been a big one that I'm still really struggling to overcome, because I still don't take the sick days that I should. And I still have a hard time being like, no, it's okay for me to just sit here and do nothing. I have a really hard time doing nothing. But I think just to me too, I don't want to say I have a lot of trauma around the feminine identity, but I've spent a lot of my life being told that I wasn't a good girl. I didn't do the feminine right. And, just the messages that you get from a really early, I cut all my hair off when I was like 7, maybe. Like, Tasha Yar came out on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I was like, women can do that? They can have short, we're going, Mom, we're going. And I remember my mom like marched me down to Supercuts, and I lobbed all my hair off, and I was like just so excited. It was so liberating to be like, I don't have to play by these rules. And I found it so refreshing. But then society is like, well, boys aren't going to like you if you look like that. And well, now you're not doing the girl thing right. And it took me a long time. Like, I mean, I was comfortable with who I am, but it definitely, especially in relationships, I'd always be like, oh, is this me? And it's like, no, it's not me. Like, I'm me. But, having to kind of come to terms with the fact that it's other people's hangups. Like, it doesn't have to be mine. I'm living my life the way I am. And, I don't have to follow the binary line. I don't have to play by, patriarchal rules. You want to apply this to people? That's great. You're not going to apply it to me, and it's going to be everybody's going to be fine. But yeah, I still I think of how much time I've spent in relationships second guessing myself because of my inability to fall into a binary. It's just so much wasted time. So much wasted time.
I think we try to make ourselves small because, like, at our core, like every human being, we want to be accepted and loved. And we're afraid that if we're too much or we're too big or we're not the thing that people want, then they won't love us anymore, which, you know, can be a very valid fear for a lot of people.
It can be. And even if you come from a family that you know is going to support you, it's still hard. Like, you know, like I said, I grew up in a family where my uncle was gay. I grew up with him and his partner. I didn't grow up in a family that, like, I knew that I would be fine. I would be loved. But telling my mom, like, oh my, God, that was so hard. That was so hard. And I knew it would be fine. Like, I knew it would be fine. I just have so much, like, for the people who know that it's not going to be fine. Like, oh yeah, because it's hard even when you know everything's okay. Like, it's not easy. Because you know, like, you don't want it to change how people view you. And like, I get now the fear that, like, my parents might have had for me. Like, not that I don't think it was a surprise to anybody. Like, I don't think the little child who cut all their hair off and ran around in, like, jeans and chucks forever was ever questioning that everything was going to be normal, like, quote unquote standard. But yeah, I think even from, you know, now knowing, like, some of the things that I probably perceived from my family, granted they've always been 100% supportive of me, you know, that's coming from just wanting your children to be safe and knowing that having certain identities make them inherently unsafe in the world, not because of anything they've done, just because of who they are and other people's inability to accept them. And I didn't understand that until I had a child, and then I went, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. You know, I get it. Like, this fear comes from this desire to protect this human being, and now realizing that the world isn't going to be as supportive of them as you are. And yeah.
I mean, it totally makes sense to me, like, why you'd get emotional talking about that moment when you actually felt like the release to be yourself.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's what we're afraid of not having. And then when you finally get the chance to authentically just feel comfortable, you're like, oh, I don't have to be anything else.
Yeah.
Like, what a huge relief to finally find that. And most people never experience not having that, which is wild.
and even, like, friends that I have that are neurodivergent, you know, when they have friends around that they can, like just stim and just not even, you know, have to be aware of it. And you just get them, and you'll see them sometimes just be like, oh, and it's like, yeah, no, you're fine. Like, you're fine. Go on with that. Or, you know, disassociate. Or, you know, I had a friend for a long time that was really agoraphobic, and she had spent so much time working on it. And just, I remember the first time she looked at me at dinner, and she's like, I'm on the verge of a panic attack. And it was like, tell me what we need to do. Like, we're going to get you through it. Just tell me what you need to do. And, you know, and her being able to be comfortable enough with me that was like, yeah, we're on this ride together. You're fine. Like, I got you. Yeah, it's hard. It's sad that it's hard to find that, but it really is. You know, whether you're queer, whether you're disabled, whether you're neurodivergent, it can be really hard to find your people.
I think it says more about the fears and insecurity of everyone else that we have to wade through. And we spend most of our lives taking their insecurities on as our own, when really it's their problem. Like you said, it's not our problem that you're uncomfortable or afraid of this or weirded out. Like, that is your problem. Yeah. We're just trying to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I always laugh when people bring up, like, the queer agenda, and I'm like, the queer agenda is, like, to garden, drink tea, and own kittens. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but
just want to be here,
exist. Yeah,
just want to exist. Slight pivot, maybe not huge pivot, but talk to me about what you do in the industry.
So I am the communications manager at Snowbright Studio, which means my job is really hard to describe. I have one of those positions that sort of pushes out into a lot of different avenues of the company. At the surface level, I am the person that you talk to online when you talk to Snowbright. So I run our social media channels. So I'm active on Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and managing our accounts there. If you email us, you're probably going to get me first, and then I will either handle anything you need or I will push you off into the different areas with the other Snowbrighters that might be able to handle your particular concern more appropriately or more specifically. I do a lot of work around our crowdfunding campaigns. So I do a lot of the maintenance, building, and kind of upkeep of the campaigns and the campaign page. Do a lot of the interaction with the community. Grace also does a lot of that too. And then of course our art department is extremely active in that. Things don't look the way they do unless the art department touches it. But I'm very active in that. And then because of my education background, I'm also active in a lot of kind of the behind the scenes stuff that we do. Grace often describes us as a bit of an iceberg. The games are what you see sort of breaking off above the waves, but we do a lot of work sort of behind the scenes, in and around games and education and, diversity awareness and a lot of other stuff that is meatier, but the public probably isn't as interested in. So I've led and co-led workshops with other organizations in some of those instances as Snowbright when we've been brought on for things. And then I always forget that I do a lot with their magazine. It just sort of zips right by me that I do a lot of the fulfillment for that. I also am the person that manages like the game review section and setting up all the interviews for the shops and the game devs that we do, and then often handle kind of like the fan sections and stuff as well. So I'm kind of in a little bit of everything. I'm one of those positions that touches on a lot of stuff, which I hear is very common for people in that kind of communications position. It's one of those that sort of spreads out. It's not like a super limited thing. It tends to be kind of a diverse, many hats sort of a position. And I love it. I came on initially as part-time just to sort of manage social media, and then I've just stayed on and been full-time for 4 years. I think I'm heading towards my 5th in fall. So it's been good. I love what I do. It's fun because it's different every day. Like there's a lot of things that you have to do every day, but then we'll have certain projects where something's completely different, and I'm working on something totally different for a while. I do a lot of the QA for our digital stuff as well, so sometimes I get to harass our game developer by trying to break her things, which is always enjoyable. Probably more enjoyable for me than it is her.
That's so much. I work in marketing and communications as well, and I will just clarify for anyone listening, that sounds like a lot, and it is so much. I don't know. You're obviously very good at it to do that and not have a mental breakdown every day. So
I mean, there's times where you forget things. Like I get really excited when people screw up posts. Like it's awful. It's awful. But
like Schadenfreude?
Like anytime somebody posts like a company posts something and there's like a misspelling or they've totally just boffed something, I just like I'm scream capping it and I'm sharing it. I'm like, oh my God, do you see what this person did? The social, they're just dying. And I'm like, then it's awful of me, but it's my reminder that we're human and that these positions are in so many different, like our fingers are in so many different pies, that the fact that we don't mess things up more than we do is kind of impressive. I mean, I messed something up today and it was like, I felt awful, but occasionally we do things wrong, and we're in, like when you're in comms, it's anytime you screw up, the whole world gets to see it. Like, it's not like it's a small thing. It's never a small thing. It's always like, yeah, I screwed up this thing and now I got to like email people or email 50 people or like the whole internet has witnessed it. Yeah, it's not like this quiet thing where you're like, oops, let me fix it. And only the teams has, yeah.
So backing up a little bit, talk to me
Yes.
about Snowbright. So give us
Yes.
some context for people who don't know what Snowbright is.
So, Snowbright Studio, we are a queer indie game development studio. We started off actually as kind of an educational R&D company, and we were focusing on, pretty heavily kind of the space where esports and education sort of met, which was a huge burgeoning industry pre-COVID. So we had kind of come on and we were doing, we're doing research projects, and we had a league that we were running, and we're really kind of active in that space. And then COVID hit, and the writing on the wall was that things were going to be like, this wasn't going to work, especially our model of it, which was very local and personal and like face to face. Like that wasn't going to happen during COVID. So we wound down that aspect of us, and we started up the Snowbright, which is now what everybody kind of knows us as. And we started working on game development. And I think the most important thing to kind of know about us is we are a company that puts a lot of heart and soul and intention behind the products that we make. And I think a lot of that comes from our education background, like as a company. When we started working on our first tabletop game, Tea Time Adventures, we were kind of looking at the space and trying to figure out like what was missing in the tabletop space. And Grace and I had been very active both in education and in sort of esports and that kind of digital space. Grace has a much bigger background in tabletop than I do. And kind of like that initial awareness is like, well, we know that gender diversity, queerness, and just feminine, representation in games is not great. So we know that there needs to be more room for that. And we were kind of working on that in the esports sector. When it came to tabletop, the same things sort of really apply. And then on top of that, when it came to like TTRPGs, just the amount of violence that existed, everything was fight this, fight that, battle this. And we really wanted to create space that was just, peaceful, non-combative, where your challenges that you were dealing with were really different. So, Tea Time Adventures came into formation. It took a lot of different avenues before it became what it is. But, when we started kind of putting it together as a TTRPG, it was, can we create an experience, something that was more than just a game? Can we create an experience? Could create an experience that is, heartwarming and comforting and non-combat driven, but still really engaging? Can we create something that is very queer and sort of disabled and neurodivergent forward? The comment of like queer hallmark kind of came up. Like, we wanted heartwarming stories that represented the queer community, and you don't usually see those. Like a lot of times, queer stories are trauma based, and we didn't want that. So, we created this world where the entire alphabet's in it. I think when we wrote our first cishet character, it was like all of a sudden we realized we'd written our first cishet character, and it was like, there's our diversity character, because just you've got everybody in there, and you've got characters that are disabled. Like I'm hard of hearing, and we have Mayor Blinken Montesquieu is also hard of hearing, and it was really cool for me to see him because it was like, hey, like that's me. So it became really important for us to make sure that we had a lot of good representation in our products, and that our products meet a need. So, Tea Time Adventures, there was a lack at that point in time of that kind of space. Now there's a lot more of it. Like you've got Wander Home, you've got, there's more cozy board game and tabletop experiences, or sort of have come out of that time period from when we first started working on Tea Time Adventures till now. And it's really awesome to see. Like we get really excited when we're at conventions and you're like, oh, that's new. And that's like, very similar. And it's great because it shows that it is meeting a need. Like these people, there are people there that want that and need it. And we're happy to be one of the studios that's providing it. And we're really happy that other studios are also starting to kind of provide that. But sort of the same thing with the other games that we do, like Ink. While it is combat driven, Ink is at its core a game about grief, and kind of coming to terms with passing. There's a lot of kind of emotion to process in this game, and it's been interesting watching people do live plays of it because everybody has a lot of fun with Ink, And then there's also these really cathartic emotional moments in it where, the players are processing kind of their characters' past life or moving forward if they actually get to complete the game. It's really interesting watching how moving it can be for groups, which is what we wanted. Like, but you never know until you see it played whether it actually hits the way you intended it to. So even, our combat-driven game has a real, I don't want to say a learning component to it, but there's sort of a social emotional awareness that runs underneath all of our products that is very intentional. At our core, we are educators. A lot of us are educators, and so I don't know that we can make a product that doesn't in some way try to make the world a better place. That's definitely like the intentionality that I think is behind a lot of what we do, both publicly and again, like I said, all the ice chunks that are under the sea is also us working on that, opening doors for people, creating safe space, promoting the world that we'd kind of like to see, through the games that we make and the work that we do. It's interesting too, though, because like a lot of people don't know the education background of Snowbright Studio. Sometimes we lead with it. It depends what space we're in, but a lot of times we don't. We just make games. And being educators, like we've seen a lot of ed games, and a lot of ed games are not great. But it's interesting being at conventions and having people start talking to you and they'll be like, oh, well, you might be surprised, but I use this in my class for this. And I just sort of smile and I'm like, no, I'm not surprised because that's actually 100% intentional. Like, yeah, we're teachers. So, the fact that you're using it for that was kind of why we wrote this is, it was designed to elicit that thought process or that, that sort of emotional dig. And it's really fun seeing educators find it. Like we've got teachers that use Tea Time Adventures for their classes, and we've got groups that are using ink as well, and then Cozy Companion. It's funny how we can sniff each other out. Like yeah, it's there. There's an intentionality underneath all of it because of the background of the company.
Yeah. Do you say kiddos?
I don't.
Phrase?
I don't.
So many people said, but the kiddos. And I'm like, is that a common? Does everyone just say kiddos?
I think in elementary, yes, because all the elementary school teachers did. In middle school, no, I think they'd eat you alive. Like you don't call your middle school kids kiddos. No, that's highly disrespectful. I loved my students. I got them for 3 years, which isn't the norm for most teachers, especially at that age range. You usually get them for a brief period and then they're gone. Yeah, no kiddos. Yeah.
I worked with one school and they did not call the students. They were learners.
Learners, yeah.
Yeah.
That's becoming more common. A lot of times when we work on projects that are specifically education based, we will use the terminology learners instead of students as well. It's becoming more common. It also transfers more into a variety of learning spaces. So, programs that teach like in after school or programs that teach in libraries, they don't necessarily refer to their kids as students because it's not a school setting. So when you embed the term learners, it can apply to a lot of different venues of learning.
Yeah. None of this is really board game related, but I do think it's I think it's interesting in a very specific experience, you have your own language. And I think that's kind of how you find each other, I think. So one of the key indicators of like you're talking to someone like,
yeah.
I'm picking up these little clues. I might have an inkling that
Yeah. Educators totally have it too.
So after all that good stuff, what are you seeing right now? You've mentioned a couple examples, but what are you seeing in the industry? And you work in several industries, but what are you seeing that's giving you hope about the future in terms of, where we're going in terms of inclusivity specifically?
I think the rise in cozy gaming to me is a really positive thing. And I'm happy that I'm seeing it in both the digital and tabletop space, because for a lot of times, cozy games, both digital and tabletop, were viewed as the feminine, and the feminine was something that was not gaming. So cozy gaming didn't really have its place, or it was just girls do it. It's not real gaming. And now we're finding a kind of it's in its moment, and there are a ton of cozy games that are popular both digitally and tabletop, and they're becoming popular with a wider range of people. We're seeing, I think, more men stop by our booth and be really interested in tea time adventures. I'm seeing, more male content creators have whole sections on cozy games that they're excited for, and there's just more cozy games being built. And granted, cozy game is a big umbrella and it can mean a lot of different things depending on how you're choosing to define it. But the fact that it exists, and the fact that the term is becoming a lot wider used and a lot more people are being able to access it and a lot more content is being intentionally made to fit under that umbrella, is showing that there's being a push to include more femme identifying, more gender diverse, and just more like neurodiverse individuals within the community, and creating safe gaming experiences for them. So that is really exciting to see, because there's a lot of work that's gone into making that be acceptable, and the fact that it's becoming as acceptable as it is really exciting for me to see, because it's not a small thing. Like, it's a big thing that, now there's whole TikTok channels just devoted to cozy games like that. That's huge, and they're doing well, and that's even bigger. I think too, we're seeing a lot more. I don't know if there's more queer representation, because there are a lot of queer individuals in the gaming space. There's a ton, and that's not new. I think one of the issues that we've had when we've been doing some of the research things is it's just not tracked. It's not one of the data points that people care to collect. So you don't know how many, NBs there are, or trans individuals there are in certain spaces, because people just want to know if you're male or female, and that's it. So there's data points that we've been missing for a really long time that give a real indication of how many individuals are in these spaces. But we know just from personal experience that there's a lot of us there. And so I think we're seeing a lot more people speaking up and being vocal about their existence there. You're seeing a lot more really cool representation of gender diversity in the gaming space. Not that some people still don't get it horribly wrong, but we're seeing a lot more cases where people are getting it right, where people are starting to look at even just kind of the rule book and making sure that the rule book isn't just written from like a male pronoun. They're switching things up. And that might seem like a small thing, but when you read a rule book and it toggles between, well, he then does this, or it's just gender neutral the whole way through, it's like, okay, this was intentional. Somebody had the thought here of, we are including women, we're including men, we're including, non-binary, trans, we're including everybody. Like, we're making this rule book inclusive. You didn't used to see that. You're seeing that now, not everywhere, but you're seeing it. And that's a really positive change. We just did our first annual non-binary tabletop game awards, and just having people submit for that, and we didn't know how many people we were going to have that were going to submit, and then getting a pile of people that put in their work, or that submitted work that other people did, was also really refreshing. Just getting to see how much content is being made by just gender diverse individuals is really beautiful. And as much as it can be frustrating to have our industry explode every 6 to 7 months on social media, the fact that it does, the fact that when people who are conducting themselves in really inappropriate manner are being called out, like the fact that they are being called out now is really big. And the fact that, like, now you're seeing a lot more kind of rallying around, I don't want to say the victims, but you're seeing a lot more people rallying around, the people who have experienced some really horrible things, and not just having to be a knee-jerk defensive reaction to somebody who's been accused of something. Like, I feel like the industry is becoming more aware. It's starting to change. We planned an event, not Snowbright, but a group that I'm active with planned an event, and we're like, oh, we would like this to be a dry event, because bad things happen when you mix alcohol and gamers, at conventions. Like, we want to create a safe space, and having that just instantly be like, yeah, okay, was huge, because 5 years ago that would have been unheard of. Like, there are a lot of positive changes happening, and I know it can kind of feel hard to see just because there's been a lot of really negative stuff in the world happening too, but I do really feel like our community is starting to change in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think as a way to kind of tie some of the things we've talked about together, like for me, when I use Cozy, and I've been using it like a lot lately, for me, it means I'm watching something or experiencing something that gives me a similar-ish sense to that feeling I get when I am comfortable and like my authentic self.
Yeah.
Like there aren't themes that are making me feel queasy, even if I don't verbalize them, or I might not even be able to articulate them. I don't feel uneasy. I don't feel unsafe. I don't feel like I have to put aside my instincts or morals to try and make myself smaller, or try to convince myself I'm comfortable in a space or watching a thing or doing a thing. Like to me, Cozy is, oh, I can just enjoy this.
Yeah.
Like I am just comfortable. I'm cozy. I'm not doing some kind of internal mental math to try and make myself comfortable.
Yeah.
So to me, that's how I define cozy. If I define something as cozy, it's like, oh, I sat down, and whether it's an anime or a game or a tabletop RPG, like I just had a good time and I didn't have to be anyone other than myself.
Yeah.
In this moment. That's how I define it. So
yeah. No, I think that's a good definition.
Yeah, tying it together of that's what we're going for. And I think there will always be combat violent games. Like they're not going anywhere. I understand it. People enjoy it. It serves a function. But also it's okay. We can have cozy games too. Like not every game has to be that. There is a market for that. There are people who are seeking that out.
Yeah, and it's just as valid a market as the other markets that exist. And it's nice to see that be respected more. That those are serious gamers. Like we see the groups that play Tea Time Adventures and the work that those GMs put into their games is just, it's intense. It's no less intense than somebody who's building out this epic, battle that people are going to go through for the next 5 sessions. Like it's just different, but there's still, it's still role play. It's still this immersive experience that you're creating. It's theater essentially. It's just a different type of theater.
And I would argue it takes more, thought and empathy to make sure you're creating those safe, comfortable spaces for everyone.
Yeah.
It's very easy to just throw something on the table, and if someone is uncomfortable, to gloss over it and be like, oh, it's fine. And you can do that in a lot of...
Yeah.
I don't know. I just had a conversation about fan service. I'm like, yeah, you can write it off as, well, it's fan service, or you can talk about it and you can identify it and then know that there are other options. It doesn't have to be that. You don't have to be comfortable with it.
Think about how much more common safety tools are now for TTRPG experiences, which, didn't always exist or weren't as commonplace at a table. And now, even if you're at a table that doesn't necessarily totally do them, if you were to request them, I don't think it would be looked down on at most tables anymore. Like, and for a lot, it's part of session 0. Like part of session 0 is, this is what we do. We set up our norms and our expectations, and these are the safety tools that we're using. And I love that, especially they're needed for everything. Like they're even needed for Tea Time Adventures. Like I think any game that you play, because you don't know what's going to make somebody uncomfortable. Like everybody has different triggers. And the fact that we've gotten to the point where we can have that conversation and be like, okay, if something starts to go in a direction that's uncomfortable for you, this is how you let me know. And then I will respect it. We don't have to talk about it. We'll just shift gears. I think that's beautiful that we're seeing that in just all sorts of gaming experiences, because it needs to be there. And then I think it helps, as you said, creating that cozy experience. When you're at a table that's safe, then it allows you to go emotionally deeper into some of these games too, and be able to really kind of get lost in that role play experience a little bit more.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you have any recommendations for people who are looking for cozy titles, including your own? You've talked about them, but maybe just give us a concise rattling of some of your faves at the end here.
I'm going to have a really hard time with that, because I'm one of those people that as soon as you ask me a question that needs me to list things, I can't think of anything. That is my, I can never do that.
I totally understand that. I feel like our brains are probably somewhat similar.
It just goes.
I like rephrasing it. What are some recent? What's like the last game that you've played that you really enjoyed?
So for me, a really cathartic, cozy experience is escape room games and mystery games.
Mm.
So my dad and I, we live like 600 miles, no, 600, 300. We live 7 hours away. Californians, we don't do miles, we do time. We did Box One, which is a Neil Patrick Harris game. That was awesome. And then we've been getting into mystery agency games, and we just did Balthazar's Gem. And they don't qualify as what most people consider cozy, I guess, but like for me that's a cozy game because it's just this experience that you just get to immerse yourself in, and you can just play it solo, which I really love because I live in a house that's very digital game friendly. I'm the only person that plays board games, so if I can't play it solo, I got to wait for my dad to come and visit. But we now do it with board games where we'll buy the same one and then we'll just sit and compare notes, and we'll do like these types of games together. So we just played that, and it was a lot of fun. I geek out on it because now I'm in the industry and we make games, and so when I open up a game and I see like a wooden box and metal things, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I start like, there's like cost analysis, and I'm over here going, oh my, but do you understand what went into making this thing? My dad's like, just play the game, Carrie. But those for me are I get a lot of enjoyment from those.
I really like the unlock ones. I like that
Yeah.
you can like repackage and give them away. I think, is it Exit? Are those the ones?
Yeah. Exit.
Still one-time use.
Yeah, Exit's one-time use. Balthazar's Stone is another one where it's like it's a wooden chest that you unlock all the padlocks, and you could totally hand it off to somebody. One of the conversations that I was having with a friend online was I wished like if you had a local network and everybody just kind of bought that one, and then you could just hand them off, and sort of, it'd be a great way to reduce the cost, because they're expensive games generally, because they're very high quality, they're made to last a long time, and yet they're also single play. So for me, they are very much a social game, because to me it feels like they're designed that like I've bought one, you've bought one, we're then going to swap after we've played. And so they make their way through a lot of different homes. I don't know that actually happens, but that's in my mind, that's how it would happen. I grew up playing Myst, the video game, so I'm very big on like, give me the open world, give me the puzzle, give me the anthropology. Like I want to solve this mystery. Like that's my jam. And I don't want to say it's a bygone era for game design, but it's not a really common theme anymore. So that's why I like the games like Box One and Balthazar. It's the closest I can get to that in tabletop.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think even if some of the clues are full on nonsense, in my opinion, it's still a good time.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever played them and been like, oh, I hated this. I'm like, oh, this is a certain level on a scale of I enjoyed this.
Yeah. And sometimes I've loved it because I'll be sitting there and my dad will be sitting there and we'll be like, it should not take us this long. And then I'll be like, we're overthinking this. What is the easiest possible solution to this? Because you and I are doing calculus right now, and there's no way this game is asking us to do that. And then we'll be like, oh yeah, you just do this. And we're like, there we go. We solved it. Like all we had to do was not think hard about it. Yeah.
And that can be hard. That's hard.
It can be really hard because the brain's just like constantly on this little hamster wheel.
It's hard. I would do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was so much good stuff. I think we've packed in just so much content for people to unpack, just sort through, take what serves you, come back for more when you're ready. I think this was quality content, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm glad. I know great. I can talk. I'm one of those
and you
people
said
that
great things.
That's good. That's good. I'm one of those weird people that really loves public speaking. So yeah.
If you asked me to describe myself, I would not say I enjoy talking in general. But yeah, if I'm comfortable and you get me going, I can talk. I do not like talking about myself. I despise it.
Yeah, I'm both on that one. It's a weird one. I don't like talking myself up. I'm fine talking about my personal experiences, but like we'll get into situations where it's like, oh, introduce yourself, introduce what you do and like your background. And I'm like, I've done these three things. And then, Grace will be like, and you've done this and you've done this and you've done this. I'm like, yeah, but that's just, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, absolutely the same. My friends pick on me. Like they give me so much shit because I showed them a picture of a Lego I built and it's next to an Emmy. And they're like, you have an Emmy?
You're like, yeah.
I'm like, I have 4. And they're like, why did we not know this? I was like, what does it matter? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Like it's always tripped me out, like parasocial relationships and how people will put like content creators up on sort of a pedestal. And I was I make the ships behind are things that I've made because of a game that I was really active in for a very long time. And it'd always be weird when people would eventually reach out to me and be like, oh, I didn't think I could actually talk to you. And it's like, I'm just this geek living in a house, like with why? Like I forget to eat lunch just like you do, like I'm not always great at hydration. Like, it's funny. Like I have a hard time realizing that sometimes people don't see the humanness behind, because it's just like, yeah, no, we're all just people, peopling, and peopling's hard, no matter how many Emmys you have or whatever your accolades are. Like peopling.
I mean, I just don't personally see myself as like a highly impressive person to be
Yeah.
on a pedestal. Like I'm also terrible in like a job interview. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, why should we hire you? I'm like, I don't know. I would question your judgment as well if you want me to be honest.
Because I think about that sometimes too, where I'll be like, oh well, I don't know why you'd want me to come sit on this panel. I'm just me doing my job in here, and that's just my job. And then I'll get talking with people about things, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I actually do know what I'm doing. Like I do have experience. I do. Never mind. I get it. And then I'll immediately forget it and be like, why am I here again? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe to go full circle on this, I think that is probably product of the minimization that I've done throughout my life where, if I'm comfortable and I get the chance, I can be confident and brag or humble brag if, I don't know, if I feel like I can do it, and then usually pretty quickly reminded that I need to be small and I shouldn't do that. And it's off-putting to people. I shouldn't do that.
I mean, I think that could be a big part of it, because I think that's, like we were talking about, like that, imposter syndrome. I think that's where like imposter syndrome stems from. It's like, am I really big enough? Can I really be big enough? And like, yeah, we can. For me too, it's also that thought of like, I don't ever see myself as like the pinnacle or the top of the ladder. And it's not because I don't think that I'm qualified, but I'm always really open and accepting of there being people that are better than me. And I always kind of hope that there are people that are better than me. Like there's got to be people that are better than me, because one, I want to learn from them. Like and two, I'm okay with that. Like where I think some people just aren't, like they need to be perceived as the best. And that's never been my jam. Like take from me what you can. I will teach anybody anything that I know gladly. My goal or my hope is that they would surpass me in whatever I do and be better and learn more. And like, always excited when you find somebody that's passionate about something and knowledgeable about something and is like, yeah, I'm not even close to that. Give me the juice. Like it's, yeah.
No, I feel that very hard right now, as I'm like, I think I'm good at stuff. I am not the best at anything. So, and that's what I tend to fall on, is I'm not the best at anything. I don't know. I shouldn't be. I don't know. But we're doing it anyway, We're trying, we're practicing, we're speaking out, we're using our voices.
It's interesting too, because there are people that I will watch stream, and they might have like 5 or 6 people that come, but I love their content. I love their content. Like, and to me, it makes my day happy to be able to sit in their stream for 4 hours and listen to them while I work. Like, it makes my day. They might not be big. They might not be like, they're definitely not making bank off of Twitch, but my day is better because they exist. And, same thing for any kind of content. Like Tea Time Adventures isn't for everybody, but for the people that it resonates with, if it makes your life happy, like that's awesome. like in your podcast. Like, people are, if you can find the things that resonate with you, they don't have to be the best thing to be the best for somebody, like it's all perspective in the end.
Hear, hear. Amen. I'm not religious.
I'm not either, so we're good.
There we go. So speaking of finding what resonates with you, how can people find you, support Snowbright? Where should they go?
So Snowbright Studio, we are on TikTok. Hopefully we will be there for a long, long time. Please, TikTok, don't go anywhere. Really, really love that platform. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Blue Sky. We love chatting with people. So if somebody's playing any of our games, feel free to reach out. You can reach us at contact@snowbrightstudio.com, or we're Snowbright Studio across our social media platforms. We love to hear from the people that play our games. So definitely, if you're shy about chatting with the studio online, don't be. We drink a lot of tea. We have a lot of conversations about cats and possums, oddly enough. So yeah, definitely find us, give us a like, chat with us. And then I'm the Chalk Mooju, or Chalk Mooju on most platforms, CHOCMOOJOO. The only milk I like is chocolate milk. So, yep. And I've had that gamer tag forever.
There you go. And you did the smart thing of not having a gamer tag that was specifically like gender specific, or
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my icon has almost always been a cat too. It started off as a gray cat with a giant bubble of bubble gum. It's just sort of evolved. So not even species. Well, not species. It was species specific. It's a cat. Yeah. It is great though when people suddenly realize what my gamer tag means. I've had people that have known for like 5 years that all of a sudden DM me and they're like, "It's chocolate milk." And I'm like, yeah.
When you first said it, I'm like, that's a strange title to have. What role is that?
Yeah.
It's your tag. Got it.
It's my tag.
It could also be your title.
It could.
Professionally. Update the resume, is my opinion.
Keeper of the chocolate milk.
Keeper of the chocolate milk. As a disclaimer at the end here, I just want to remind everyone that we are just a couple of queer folks. We do not speak for the entire LGBTQIA plus community, nor are we trying to. The best way to be an ally is just to keep learning, listening. Remember, we're all just trying to get through it together. That's all I have. If you're listening, know that you're loved and perfect just the way you are. And until next time, bye.
Bye.